On the night of January 31st, his car had already been sealed by the FBI. Yet somehow, someone still managed to get inside it. Not before it was taken into federal custody. Not after the investigation had ended, but while it was under federal control. At the time, the investigation into Nancy Guthrie's kidnapping was operating at full scale. More than 400 federal agents were examining every piece of evidence connected to the final hours of her life. The vehicle was believed to be completely secure, completely untouchable. But in reality, it wasn't. A source close to the investigation claims that evidence inside that car was tampered with while it was in federal custody. This was the same vehicle that drove Nancy Guthrie home on the last night she was ever seen alive. Despite the seriousness of that claim, the FBI has never confirmed it, never denied it, and has never released a single detail about what the forensic examination of that vehicle actually revealed. Consider what that silence suggests. Over the course of 33 days, investigators publicly released detail after detail. The backpack, DNA evidence, a glove discovered 2 miles away, a belly band holster worn incorrectly on camera, even a second surveillance image captured 3 weeks before the crime. Piece after piece of forensic information was shared with the public. But when it comes to the car belonging to the last person who saw Nancy Guthrie alive, there has been absolute silence. Not a single word. That raises a serious question. Someone may have tampered with federal evidence during an active kidnapping investigation, yet the official investigation has said nothing about it. Either this is the most closely protected lead in the entire case, or it may hold the answer to what really happened to Nancy Guthrie. The timeline takes us back to 9:48 p.m., January 31st. At Nancy Guthrie's home in Catalina Foothills, the garage door slowly closed. Her son-in-law stood in the driveway and watched it shut before driving away. That moment marks the final confirmed time anyone on record saw Nancy Guthrie alive and safely inside her home. Not around that time. Not roughly then. Exactly 9:48 p.m. A garage door closed in a quiet Tucson neighborhood, and the last witness to Nancy Guthrie's safety drove away into the darkness. After that moment, the timeline disappears into silence. There was a 5-hour gap with no witnesses and no recorded activity. From 9:48 p.m. until 1:47 a.m., Nancy Guthrie was alone inside the house. No camera captured movement. No confirmed visitors arrived. No publicly logged phone calls were made. No form of contact has ever been placed within those hours by investigators. For 4 hours and 59 minutes, the story of her disappearance contains no external record at all. Then, at 1:47 in the morning, the silence ended abruptly. A masked individual approached the house and physically removed the doorbell camera from its mount. The person then packed the lens with vegetation before disconnecting it entirely. It wasn't a random act. It was deliberate and calculated, the action of someone who knew exactly where the camera was located, understood how to disable it, and knew precisely how much time they had once the feed went dark. The FBI later released a second surveillance image, confirming that the same masked individual had appeared at the property as early as January 11th, nearly 3 weeks before the crime took place. Investigators believe this visit was not random. It appears to have been a period of reconnaissance. The individual was likely studying the layout of the property, observing movement patterns, identifying camera positions, and determining possible entry points well before February 1st. When the suspect returned on February 1st, they came prepared. Authorities say the person carried a 25-liter Ozark Trail backpack, a model sold exclusively at Walmart. They were also equipped with gloves and a firearm secured in a belly band holster, though the holster appeared to be worn incorrectly. One of those gloves later became critical evidence. DNA recovered from the glove is currently undergoing analysis at a private laboratory in Florida. In addition, investigators discovered a second DNA profile from inside the residence itself. Both genetic samples are now part of genealogical testing efforts, but so far neither profile has been publicly matched to any known individual. Between 9:48 p.m., when the garage door closed, and 1:47 a.m., when the masked figure appeared, there remains a gap of 4 hours and 59 minutes. During that entire period, there are no witnesses and no confirmed records. Only one individual is known to have been present at the home shortly before that gap began. Nancy Guthrie's son-in-law was the final person known to have spoken with her. He was the last to hear her voice, the last to see her face, and the final person whose presence at the property that night appears in the confirmed public timeline before the events that followed. His vehicle was at the residence during those hours. The FBI collected and processed the vehicle as evidence. Yet investigators have never publicly released any findings from that examination. Before any further analysis, one critical point must be placed clearly on the record. Sheriff Mark Nanos publicly announced that every member of Nancy Guthrie's immediate family, siblings and spouses included, has been formally cleared in investigation. The FBI confirmed the same position. According to both agencies, no immediate family member is currently considered a suspect in the events that unfolded on the front porch between 1:47 a.m. and 2:28 a.m. on February 1st. That clearance is official and documented. The DNA recovered from the glove discovered 2 miles from the scene, along with the DNA found inside the home, does not match any member of the family. In addition, cell tower records, surveillance footage showing the masked individual approaching and leaving the property, and the reconstructed timeline all indicate the involvement of an outside actor whose identity has not been publicly revealed, even 33 days into the investigation. This represents the confirmed evidentiary picture. It is the body of evidence that led to the formal clearing of the family, and that conclusion is not disputed by investigators. However, it is important to understand the exact limits of what formal clearance actually means. Formal clearance simply indicates that the existing evidence, DNA results, cell tower data, surveillance footage, and the established timeline, does not place the cleared individuals within the critical operational window in a way that supports their direct involvement in carrying out the crime itself. Formal clearance has a very specific meaning within an investigation. It simply indicates that investigators reviewed the available evidence and found no grounds to charge that individual with the crime that occurred on the porch that night. But it does not mean every aspect of the investigation connected to that person has been fully explained. Being formally cleared does not guarantee that every piece of evidence related to that person was preserved with perfect integrity throughout the federal investigation. It also does not confirm that the forensic analysis of a cleared individual's vehicle produced results so clean that no further questions could arise. In addition, formal clearance does not evaluate behavioral patterns in the weeks after the crime, even though such patterns can sometimes become important data points in cases involving targeted violence against the family of a public figure. Most importantly, formal clearance does not resolve every question surrounding an investigation. Being cleared of committing the crime itself is very different from having every question connected to the investigation fully answered. Those two statuses are not the same, and they have never been treated as the same in criminal investigations. The allegation regarding evidence in the son-in-law's vehicle is not about the crime itself. Instead, it focuses on what may have occurred later, during the investigation, while that vehicle was already in federal custody. Those are two entirely separate issues. The formal clearance addresses the first question. It was never intended to answer the second. Looking strictly at the public record, here is what is known about the handling of the vehicle that drove Nancy Guthrie home on January 31st. The key detail is where the official record stops. In a federal kidnapping case, investigators move quickly. Any vehicle connected to the scene or present during the pre-crime window is immediately treated as potential evidence once the federal investigation begins. Processing does not wait for days. It begins within hours. There are clear reasons for this urgency. Biological material can degrade, fibers can transfer or contaminate surfaces, and electronic data stored in vehicle systems can be overwritten. Because of these risks, the FBI typically places vehicles connected to kidnapping investigations into controlled custody as soon as operationally possible. However, this case leaves three important gaps that have never been publicly addressed. Gap 1. Between 9:48 p.m., when the son-in-law dropped Nancy Guthrie at her home, and the moment federal investigators officially took custody of the vehicle, there was a period of private access. The exact length of that window has never been publicly confirmed. No law enforcement agency has stated on record that the vehicle moved directly from the drop-off location into federal evidence custody without any time in private possession. During that interval, the vehicle was not yet under federal control. It could have been accessed, driven, or even cleaned. Anything inside the vehicle during that time could have been removed or altered without leaving a trace in the official investigative record, since investigators had not yet taken possession of it. Gap 2. The allegation from the source does not refer to that private window before custody. Instead, it points specifically to the period after the vehicle had already been placed in federal custody, during the official forensic processing stage. Evidence custody relies on a chain of custody system, but that system is only as reliable as the individuals responsible for maintaining it. A breach during active federal evidence custody is rare, but it is not impossible. Similar incidents have occurred in other high-profile federal investigations, particularly when individuals involved possessed advanced knowledge of investigative procedures. When a source close to an investigation raises a specific allegation about a specific period of custody, investigators cannot simply dismiss it on the assumption that protocol should have prevented it. Standard procedure and what actually happened in practice are two different questions. Gap 3. The results of the vehicle's forensic examination have never entered the public record. Not in summary form. Not as a statement confirming that nothing of investigative value was found. Not even as a simple acknowledgement that the examination was completed and the vehicle was later returned. This absence is particularly notable when compared with the level of detail released in other parts of the case. Investigators publicly described the suspect's clothing, including a belly band holster worn incorrectly. They identified the exact brand of the backpack and confirmed that it was sold exclusively at Walmart. They disclosed the number of DNA profiles recovered and their current processing status. They even revealed the location of a glove discovered 2 miles from the crime scene. Yet the vehicle driven by the last person confirmed to have seen Nancy Guthrie alive has produced no publicly released forensic information at all, even after 33 days of active investigation. For 33 consecutive days, not a single update about that vehicle has appeared in the public record. In active federal investigations, especially those with a functioning public information strategy, oversights are usually corrected quickly. Silence of that length, while investigators continue releasing other detailed evidence, is unusual. When information about nearly every other element is shared, but one piece remains completely absent, it suggests a deliberate decision to protect that specific evidence. If the allegation regarding that vehicle is accurate, what occurred would not simply be a procedural mistake. Under Title 18 of the United States Code, Section 1512, tampering with evidence connected to an official federal proceeding is a serious felony offense, carrying a potential penalty of up to 20 years in federal prison. It is not a minor violation or a state-level charge. It is a standalone federal crime, one that could run alongside the existing kidnapping investigation, an investigation that already carries the possibility of a life sentence. That means if the allegation is true, the individual responsible would have knowingly exposed themselves to 2 separate federal liabilities at the same time. The original crime under investigation and an additional 20-year federal evidence tampering charge. Both would be attached to the same case, both investigated at the federal level. Such a decision is unlikely to be accidental. Few people would knowingly risk an additional federal charge of that magnitude during an ongoing kidnapping investigation unless the evidence inside the vehicle posed an even greater threat. In other words, the risk calculation itself becomes revealing. Someone may have looked at what was inside that vehicle and concluded that allowing federal forensic teams to analyze it untouched was more dangerous than the consequences of tampering with it. That type of decision is rarely impulsive. It would imply a deliberate calculation made by someone who understood the seriousness of federal law and the potential consequences of interfering with evidence. Former FBI profiler Jim Clemente has discussed this type of behavior in his public commentary on the case. According to Clemente, some of the most revealing indicators of possible consciousness of guilt are not actions taken before investigators arrive, but those taken after an investigation is already underway. Once a person knows that federal agents are involved, once they understand that their property, their vehicle, or their environment is being examined by forensic technicians searching for biological material, fiber transfers, and trace evidence, any action taken at that stage can carry significant investigative meaning. In this situation, if the allegation is accurate, the move would have occurred after the investigation had begun, during a period when the vehicle was already under federal control. Actions taken under those circumstances tend to follow a single logic. Remaining passive was considered more dangerous than the consequences of intervening. Meanwhile, the public face of the search effort unfolded very differently. Nancy Guthrie's daughter Savannah Guthrie appeared repeatedly in front of cameras, publicly pleading for her mother's safe return. Her brother Cameron spoke out as well, and her sister Annie joined multiple coordinated family appeals. The family hired a licensed private investigator, worked alongside federal authorities to establish and announce a $1 million reward, and produced multiple public messages asking anyone with information to come forward. During that same period, the son-in-law, the person who had driven Nancy home on January 31st, remained silent. In the 33 days following her disappearance, there was no public statement, no recorded message, and no direct appeal from him asking for Nancy's safe return. There was no public message addressed to whoever might have taken her, no visible appearance alongside the family members leading the search effort. This absence stands out because he was the last person confirmed to have seen Nancy Guthrie alive, the last person known to have heard her voice, and the individual who watched the garage door close from the driveway before leaving that night. Nancy was also his wife's mother. Former FBI Special Agent Tracy Walder has also spoken about patterns like this when analyzing cases involving targeted violence against public figures or their families. Walder emphasizes that behavior in the days and weeks following a crime can become an important investigative data point. It is not proof, and it is not a conclusion on its own. Instead, it contributes to what investigators call the behavioral picture, which develops alongside the forensic picture. Both perspectives matter. Neither is sufficient by itself. Walder also notes that in situations where individuals are truly uninvolved yet deeply affected by the disappearance of someone close to them, their reactions often follow recognizable patterns, responses shaped by distress, urgency, and the overwhelming need to find the missing person. In situations like this, people who are directly connected to the victim often reach out to investigators on their own initiative. They appear in public when doing so might help generate tips. They stand beside the family during coordinated appeals because every additional voice can help keep attention on the search. When someone has nothing to weigh or calculate before speaking, complete silence while everyone else is mobilizing every available resource is not a typical response. Silence, on the other hand, is more commonly associated with individuals who are carefully measuring what they say against what investigators may already know. In this case, 33 days passed with no public statement from the last confirmed witness. He was the final person present in the driveway that night. He was the last individual known to have seen Nancy Guthrie alive, and his vehicle is now linked to a specific allegation, neither confirmed nor denied, regarding the integrity of federal evidence while it was in custody. One unusual detail might be dismissed as a personal decision. Two details can begin to form a pattern. Three details create a question investigators cannot ignore. Here, 3 points remain open: the vehicle, the allegation, and the silence. Taken together, they form a set of facts that investigators continue to examine. Looking strictly at the publicly verifiable record since February 1st, there are 5 confirmed elements that have existed side by side but have never been addressed together in a single official explanation. First, the son-in-law drove Nancy Guthrie home at 9:48 p.m. on January 31st, making him the final person confirmed to have seen her alive. Second, his vehicle was the last vehicle known to be present at the property before the crime window began at 1:47 a.m. Third, the FBI collected and processed that vehicle as evidence during a federal kidnapping investigation that has involved approximately 400 investigators, more than 55,000 tips, and a publicly announced $1 million reward. Fourth, according to a source close to the investigation, the evidence inside that vehicle may have been compromised while it was in federal custody, during the active phase of the investigation when forensic processing was underway. Fifth, the results of the vehicle's forensic examination have never been publicly released, and during the same 33-day period the son-in-law has made no public statement, even while other family members have appeared repeatedly in appeals seeking information about Nancy's disappearance. These 5 points have existed together since February 1st, and each of them connects back to the same object, that vehicle, and the continuing silence surrounding it. Meanwhile, the official investigation has been highly specific in nearly every other area. Over the same 33 days, investigators publicly discussed the doorbell camera footage, the DNA profiles recovered from a glove and from inside the residence, and the ongoing genealogical testing being conducted at a private laboratory in Florida. Authorities also described the suspect's clothing, including a bellyband holster worn incorrectly, confirmed the exact brand of the backpack and its exclusive retail source, and released information about a second surveillance image showing an unmasked individual at the property 3 weeks before the crime. In a case where investigators have been this detailed about the forensic evidence they are willing to share, one item stands out as an exception. The vehicle driven by the last confirmed witness remains the only major piece of evidence that has produced no public forensic disclosure at all. That absence does not appear to be a simple oversight. It is a silence that has been deliberately maintained. What has surrounded that vehicle for the past 33 days is not the result of oversight. It is silence by choice. Throughout the investigation, the FBI has demonstrated that it knows precisely how and when to release information when doing so serves a strategic purpose. In this case, 5 connected facts all circle back to one single piece of evidence, and a silence that has been consistently maintained around it. The formal clearing of Nancy Guthrie's immediate family did not resolve that issue, nor was it intended to. Formal clearance addresses involvement in the crime itself. The question of evidence integrity while an item is in federal custody is a completely different matter, governed by an entirely separate investigative process. Meanwhile, the reality of the case remains stark. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. Her blood was found on her front porch. Her pacemaker stopped transmitting signals at 2:28 a.m. on February 1st. A masked individual carrying a 25-liter backpack and a weapon was captured on surveillance that night. Yet that person has still not been publicly identified, despite what has become the most heavily resourced missing person investigation in Arizona history. 2 DNA profiles recovered from the case are currently being analyzed through genealogical testing at a private laboratory in Florida, moving investigators closer to a potential identification. A $1 million reward remains unclaimed. And at the center of all of this sits one vehicle. The vehicle that drove Nancy Guthrie home on the night of January 31st. The vehicle connected to the last confirmed witness to see her alive. The vehicle that, according to a source close to the investigation, may have been accessed while it was sealed inside federal custody. The vehicle whose forensic examination results have never entered the public record since the early days of February. That vehicle contains an answer. Either the evidence inside it still holds that answer, or someone made the decision to risk a federal evidence tampering charge carrying up to 20 years in prison to ensure that the answer would never be seen in its original form. Whichever possibility is true, the vehicle itself, and the allegation connected to it, remains an active lead. And investigators who continue working this case are unlikely to ignore it. If you have any information about what happened in this case, the FBI tip line is 1-800-CALL-FBI. One call, one detail, one person who knows what was inside that vehicle and what may have happened to it while investigators believed it was secure could change the course of the investigation. Because the answer to what happened inside that federal evidence facility may ultimately explain what happened on Nancy Guthrie's front porch during the early hours of February 1st. And sooner or later, that answer will come out.